bubbly. Yeah. Here's to another goddamn new year. And outside, 2 million drunk Bostonians are getting ready to sing Auld Lang Syne out of tune. I sit there in my easy chair, looking at the clouds, orange with celebration. I wonder if you're out there. Hey! The ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light day or night. And I slip on it every time. Open the third bottle of bubbly. Yeah, and I take that bottle of champagne, go into the kitchen, stand in front of the kitchen window, and I take all my clothes off, take that bottle of champagne, and I pour it on my head, feel a cascade through my hair and across my chest, and the phone rings. And it's my mother. And she says, "Hi, honey, how's Boston?" And I stand there all alone on New Year's Eve, buck naked, drenched in champagne, looking at a bunch of strangers, looking at them, looking at me, looking at them, and I say, "Oh, fine, Mom. How's Washington? Hey, the ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light midday or night, and I slip on it every time." Hey, the ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light midday or night, and I slip on it every time, yeah. So I guess the party line is I followed you up here. Well, I don't know about that. Mainly because knowing about that would involve knowing about some pathetic, ridiculous, and absolutely true things about myself that I'd rather not admit to right now. I woke up at 3 a.m. with the radio on, that Gladys Knight and the Pip song on, about how she'd rather live in his world with him than live in her own world alone. And I laid there, head spinning, trying to fall asleep, and I thought to myself, "Oh, Gladys, girl, I love you, but oh, get a life! Hey, the ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light midday or night, and I slip on it every time." Hey, the ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light midday or night, and I slip on it every time. Time, time, time. Time, time, time. Time, time, time. Time, time, time.
Michael Pemulis has this habit of looking first to one side and then over to the other before he says anything. It's impossible to tell whether this is unaffected or whether Pemulis is emulating some film noir type character. It's worse when he's put away a couple drinks. He and Trevor Axford and Hal and Cadenza are in Pemulis's room, with Pemulis's roommates shocked and trolls down at lunch, so they're alone. Pemulis and Axford and Hal stroking their chins, looking down at Michael Pemulis's yachting cap on his bed. Lying inside the overturned hat are a bunch of fair sized but bland looking tablets of the allegedly incredibly potent DMZ. The mulist looks all around behind him in the empty room. This, Inkster, axe handle, is the incredibly potent DMZ, the great white shark of organo-synthesized hallucinogens. The gargantuan feral infant of, Hal says, we get the picture. The Yale U of the Ivy League of acid, says Axford. Your ultimate psychosensual distorter, Pemulus sums up. I think you mean psychosensory, unless I don't know the whole story here. Axford gives Hal a narrow look. Interrupting Pemulus means having to watch him do the head thing all over again each time. Hard to find, gentlemen, as in very hard to find. Last lots came off the line in the early 70s. These tablets here are artifacts. Certain amount of decay and potency, probably inevitable, used in certain shady CIA era military experiments. Axford nods down at the hat. Mind control? More like getting the enemy to think their gun's a hydrangea. The enemy's a blood relative, that sort of thing. Who knows? The accounts I've been reading have been incoherent, gistless. Experiments conducted. Things got out of hand. Let's just say things got out of control. Potency judged too incredible to proceed. Subjects locked away in institutions and written off as casualties of peace. Formula shredded. Research team scattered. Reassigned. Vague, but I've got to tell you, pretty sobering rumors. These are from the early 70s, X Handle says. See the little trademark on each one with the guy in bell bottoms and long sideburns? Is that what that is? Unprecedentedly potent, this stuff. The Swiss inventor, they say, was originally recommending LSD 25 as what to take to come down off the stuff. Pemulus takes one of the tablets and puts it in his palm and pokes at it with a calloused finger. What we're looking here at either a serious sudden injection of cash. Axford makes a shocked noise. You'd actually try to peddle the incredibly potent DMZ around this sorry place? Pemulus' snort sounds like the letter K. Get a large economy-sized clue X handle. Nobody here had any clue what they've been dealing with, not to mention be willing to pay what they're worth. Why, there are pharmaceutical museums, left-wing think tanks, New York designer drug consortiums, I'm sure, be dying to dissect these. Decoct like, toss into the spectrometer and see what's what. That we could get bits from, you're saying, Axford says. Hal squeezes a ball, silently looking at the hat. Pemulus turns the tablet over. Or certain very progressive and hip type nursing homes I know guys that know of. Or down at Back Bay at the yogurt place with that picture of those historical guys Inc. was saying at breakfast was up on the wall. Ah, Ramdas, William Burroughs. Or just down in Harvard Square at Au Bon Pain, where all those 70s era guys in old wool ponchos play chess against those little clocks they keep hitting. Axford's pretending to punch Hal's arm in excitement. Pemulus says, "Or, of course, I'm thinking I could just go the sheer entertainment route and toss them in the Gatorade barrels at the meet with Port Washington on Tuesday or down at the Whataburger. Watch everybody run around clutching their heads or whatever. I'd be way into watching Wayne play with distorted senses." Hal puts one foot up on Pemulus' little frustum-shaped bedside stool and leans farther in. Would it be prying to ask how you finally managed to get a hold of these? It wouldn't be prying at all, Pemulus says, removing from the yachting cap's lining every piece of contraband he's got and spreading it out on the bed, sort of the way older people will array all their valuables in quiet moments. He has a small quantity of personal consumption lamb's breath cannabis, bought back from Hal out of a 20-gram he'd sold Hal, in a dusty baggie, a little saran wrapped cardboard rectangle with 4 black stars spaced evenly across it, the odd drying, and it looks like a baker's dozen of the incredibly potent DMZ. Sweet tart sized tablets of no particular color, with a tiny mod hipster in each center wishing the viewer peace. We We don't even know how many hits this is, he muses quietly. There's sun on the wall, with the hanging viewer and poster of the paranoid king and an enormous hand drawn Sierpinski casket. In one of the three big mullioned west windows, the academy's nothing if not well fenestrated, there's an oval flaw that's casting a bubble of ale colored autumn sunlight from the window's left side to elongate onto Pemulus's tightly made bed, and he moves everything his hat's got into the brighter bubble, going down on one knee to study a tablet between his forceps, Pamula's own stuff like philatelic forceps, a loop, a pharmaceutical scale, a postal scale, a personal size Bunsen burner, with the calm precision of a jeweler. The literature's mute on the titration. Do you take one tablet? He looks up on one side and then back around on the other at the boy's faces leaning in above. Is like half a tab a regulation hit? Two or even three tablets, maybe, Hal says, knowing he sounds greedy but unable to help himself. The accessible data is vague, Bermulez says, his profile contorted around the loop in his socket. The literature on muscimol lysergic blends is spotty and vague and hard to read, except to say how massively powerful the supposed yields are. Hal looks at the top of Bermulez's head. Did you hit a medical library? I got on med.com off lateral Alice's What's line and went back and forth and up and down through med.com. Plenty on lysergics, plenty on methoxy class hybrids. Vague and almost gossip columny shit on fit vivae compounds. To get anything, you got to cross key ergotics with the phrase muscimol or muscimulated. Only a couple things ring the bell when you key in DMZ. Then they're all potent this, sinister that, nothing with any specifics, and jumbly polysyllables out the ass. Whole thing gave me a migraine. Yes, yes. But did you actually hop in the truck and actually go to a real med library? Hal's his mother Avril's child when it comes to databases, software, spell checks, etc. Axford now really does punch him once in the shoulder, albeit the right one. Pibulus is scratching absently at the little hair hurricane at the center of his hair. It's close to 1430 hours, and the flawed bubble of light on the bed is getting to be the slightly sad color of early winter PM. There's still no sounds from the west courts outside, but there's high song of much volume through the walls' water pipes. A lot of the guys who had drilled past caring in the AM don't get it up to shower until after lunch, then sit through PM classes with wet hair and different clothes than their AM classes. Bermulez rises to stand between them and looks around the empty three-bedded room again, with neat stacks of three players' clothes and bright gear on shelves and three wicker laundry hampers bulging slightly. There's the rich scent of athletic laundry, but other than that, the room looks almost professionally clean. Bermulez and Shock's room makes Hal and Mario's room look like an insane asylum, Hal thinks. Axford drew one of only two single upper class rooms in last spring's lottery, the other having gone to the Vaught twins, who get counted as one entry in room draw. Pamula still has his cheek screwed up to keep the lope in as he looks around. One monograph had this toss off about DMZ where the guy invites you to envision acid that has itself dropped acid. Holy crow. One article out of fucking Moment of all sources talks about how this one army convict at Leavenworth got allegedly injected with some massive unspecified dose of early DMZ as part of some army experiment, and Christ only knows what, and about how this convict's family sued over how the guy reportedly lost his mind. He directs the loop dramatically at first Hal and then Exford. I mean, literally lost his mind, like the massive dose picked his mind up and carried it off somewhere and put it down someplace and forgot where. I think we get the picture, Mike. Allegedly, Moment says how the guy's found later in his army cell in some impossible lotus position, singing show tunes in a scary, deadly accurate Ethel Merman impression voice. Expert says maybe Pamula stumbled on a possible explanation for poor old Lyle and his lotus position down in the weight room gesturing with the bad right hand in the direction of the Commonwealth administration. Again, Pamulus with the thing with the head. The slackening of a cheek lets the lobe fall out and bounce off the drum tight bed, and Pamulus gets it to rebound into his palm without even looking. I think we can err on the side of not dicking the Gatorade barrels anyway. This soldier's story's moral was proceed with caution. Big time. The guy's mind is still allegedly AWOL. An old soldier now, still belting out Broadway medleys in some secretive institution, someplace. Blood relatives try to sue on the guy's behalf. Army apparently came up with enough arguments to give the jury reasonable doubt about if the guy can even be said to legally exist enough to bring suit anymore since the doze misplaced his mind. Axford feels absently at his elbow. So you're saying let's proceed with care? Why don't we? Hal kneels to prod one of the tablets up against the dusty, baggy side. His finger looks stark in the elongated bubble of light. I'm thinking these look like two tablets are a possible hit. Kind of Motrinish look to them. Visual guesswork isn't going to do it. This is not Bob Hope Inc. We could even designate it Ethel for on the phone, Axford suggests. Pamulus watches Hal arranging the tablets into the same general cardioid shape as ETA itself. What I'm saying, this is not a fool's rush-in type substancing. This show-tune soldier like left the planet. Well, so long as he waves every so often. The sense I got is the only thing he waves at is food. But that was from a massive early dose, Axford says. Hal's arrangement of the tablets on the red and gray counterplane is almost zen in its precision. These are from the 70s? After intricate third-party negotiations, Michael Pamulus finally landed 650 milligrams of the vaunted and elusive compound DMZ or Madame Psychosis from a small arms-draped duo of reputed former Canadian insurgents who now undertook small and probably kind of pathetic, outdated insurgency projects from behind the front operation of a cut-rate mirror, blown glass, practical joke and gag, trendy postcard, and low-demand old film cartridge emporium called Anti-Toy Entertainment, just up Prospect Street from Inman Square in Cambridge's decayed Portugal-Brazilian district. Because Pamulus always conducts business solo and speaks no French, the whole transaction with the knuck in charge had to be negotiated in dumb show. And since this lumberjackish anti-toy nookwad tended to look from side to side before he communicated even more than Pamulus looked all around himself, with his dim-looking partner standing there cradling a broom and also scanning for eavesdroppers in the closed shop the whole time, the whole negotiated deal had resembled a kind of group psychomotor seizure with different bits of whipping and waggling heads reflected in dislocated sections and at jagged angles and more mirrors and pebble blown glass vases than Pamulus had ever seen crammed into anywhere. A very low rent TP indeed had a hardcore porn cartridge going at 5 times the normal speed, so it looked like crazed rodents and may have turned Pamulus' sexual glance off for all time, he feels. God alone knew where these clowns had acquired 13 incredibly potent 50 milligram artifacts of the BS 1970s. But the good news is they were Canadians, and like fucking nooksters about almost anything, they had no idea what they were in possession of was worth, as it slowly emerged. Pamulus, with aid of 150 milligrams of time-released tenuate dospain, almost danced a little post-transaction jig on his way up the steps of the OTO's Cambridge bus, feeling the way Penn in his Quaker Oats hat in like the 16th century must have felt, trading a few trinkets to Babe in the Woods natives for New Jersey, he imagines, doffing the nautical cap to two nuns in the aisle. Over the course of the next academic day, the incredibly potent stash, now wrapped tight in saran and stashed deep in the toe of an old sneaker that sits atop the aluminum strut between two panels in subdorm B's drop ceiling, Pamulus' time-tested entrepot over the course of the next day or so, The matter's hashed out, and it's decided that while there's no real reason to involve Boone or Stice or Struck or Turlch, it's really Pemulis, an expert in Hell's right, duty almost, to the spirits of inquiry and good trade practice to sample the potentially incredibly potent DMZ in predeterminedly safe amounts before unleashing it on Boone or Trolch or any unwitting civilians. Expert having been allowed in on the front end, the question of Hal's defraying the opportunity cost of his part in the experiment is tactfully broached and turns out to be no problem. Pemulis's markup isn't anything beyond accepted norms, and there's always room in Hal's budget for spirited inquiry. Hal's one condition is that somebody tech literate actually take the truck down to BU or MIT's medical library and physically verify that the compound is both organic and non addictive, which Pemulis says physical hands on library assault is already down in his day planner in pen anyway. After PM drills on Thursday, as Hal Incandenza and Pemulis with camera mounted Mario Incandenza in tow stand with their hands in the chain link mesh of one of the show court's fencing and watch Teddy Schacht play a private exhibition against a Syrian satellite pro who's at ETA for 2 paid weeks of corrective instruction on a service motion that's eroding his rotator cuff. The guy wears thick glasses with a black athletic band around his head and plays with an upright, square-jawed, liquid precision and is dispatching Ted Schacht handily, which Schacht is taking with his customary sanguine good temper, giving his stall it all, learning what he can, one of the very few generally stocky players at ETA, and one of the even fewer ranked junior players around without an apparent ego, wholly non insecure since he blew out his knee on a contrap hide in the pre Thanksgiving exhibition 3 years back, which is odd, now still in, and added for just the fun, and more or less doomed, therefore, to a purgatorial existence in 128 256 Alphabetville. As Pemulis and Hal stand there sweaty, in full redond gray ETA sweats on a raw 11:05 p.m., the sweat in their hair starting to accrete and freeze, Mario's head bowed under the weight of the head mount rig, and his hideously arachnodactylic fingers whitening as the fence takes his forward weight. Hal's posture subtly but warmly inclined ever so slightly toward his tiny older brother, who resembles him the way creatures of the same order but not the same family might resemble one another. As they stand watching and hashing matters out, Hal and Pemulis, there's the thud and sprung of an EWD transnational catapult off way below to their left, and then the high, keen sound of a waste displacement projectile the clouds are too low to let them see the flight of, though a weirdly yellow sheep-shaped cloud is visible somewhere up off past Acton, connecting the horizon seam to some kind of coming storm front held off by the ATH SCME fans along the Lowell Methuen stretch of border northwest. Pemulis finally nixes the notion of performing the spirited controlled experiment here in Enfield, where Exford has to be at the A Squad's dawn drills every morning at 5 o'clock, and also Hal, unless he slept over at HMH the night before, with HMH just not being a good DMZ dropping venue at all. Pemulis, scanning up and down the length of the fence and winking at Mario, posits that a solid 36 hours of demand-free time will be advisable for any interaction with the incredibly potent Watsky. That also lets out the inter-academy thing with Port Washington tomorrow, for which Charles Tavis has chartered 2 buses, because so many ETA players are getting to go and do battle in this one. Port Washington Academy is gargantuan, the Xerox Inc. of North American tennis academies, with over 300 students and 64 courts, half of which they'll all have ready put under warm inflatable test tar cover as of like Halloween. PW staff being less into the value of elemental suffering than Stitt and Co. So many that Tavis will almost truly go ahead and bust them all back up from Long Island just as soon as the post competition dance is over, rather than shell out for all those motel rooms without corporate support. This ETA PW meet and buffet and dance are a private inter academy tradition, an epic rivalry almost a decade old. Plus, Pamulis says he'll need a couple weeks of quality Met Library stacks tossing time to do the more exacting titration and side effects research Hell agrees the soldier's sobering story seems to dictate. So they conclude the window of opportunity looks to be 11/20 to 11/21, the weekend right after the big end of fiscal year fundraising exhibition with the ETA A and B squads in singles against this year's Quebec's notoriously hapless Junior Davis and Junior Whiteman Cup squads, invited down under very quiet, low profile political conditions via the good expatriate offices of Avril in Candenza to get vivisected by Wayne and Hal et al. For the philanthropic amusement of ETA patrons and alums. Then, to dance the PM away at a catered supper and alumni ball the weekend right before Thanksgiving week, and the Whataburger Invitational in sunny Arizona. Because this year, in addition to Friday 11/20, they also get Saturday 11/21 off, as in from both class and practice, because CT and Schtitt have arranged a special one match doubles exhibition for the Saturday AM following the big meet, one between two female coaches of the Quebecois Whitemans and ETA's infamous Vaught twins, Karen and Sharon Vaught, 17, ONAN's top ranked junior women's doubles team, unbeaten in 3 years, an unbeatable duo, uncanny in their cooperation on the court, moving as one at all times, playing not just as if, but in fact because they shared a brain, or at least the psychomotor lobes of one, the twins' Siamese, fused at the left and right temple, banned from singles by ONAN regs, the broad shadow casting Vaughts, flinty eyed tire executives' daughters out of Akron, using their 4 legs to cover chilling amounts of court, plus to sweep the Charleston competition at every post exhibition formal ball for the last 5 years running. Tavis will be on the Wayne. Tavis will be on Wayne to play some sort of exhibitory thing too. Though asking Wayne to publicly smear a second Quebecer in 2 days might be a bit much. And but everyone who's anyone will be down at the lung, watching the Vaughts vivisect some adult ranked nooks, plus many, maybe Wayne. Then the ETAs will get Saturday to rest and recharge before starting both the pre Whataburger training week and the bell lap of prep for 12/12's boards, meaning late Friday night, Sunday to Sunday AM, will give Pemulis hell and Exford, and maybe Struck if Pemulis needs to let Struck in for help with the library tossing, enough time to psycho-spiritually rally from whatever Menning's withering hangover the incredibly potent DMZ might involve, and Exford in the sauna predicted it would be a witherer indeed, since even just LSD alone, he observed, left you the next day not just sick or down, but utterly empty, a shell, void inside, like your soul was a wrung-out sponge. Hell wasn't sure he concurred. An alcohol hangover was definitely no frolic in the psychic glade, all thirsty and sick, and your eyes bulging and receding with your pulse. But after a night of involved hallucinogens, Hale said, the dawn seemed to confer on his psyche a kind of pale, sweet aura, a luminescence. Halation, Axford observed. Bermulez appears to have left out of these calculations the fact that he'll get that Saturday PM off classes only if he makes the traveling list for the Tucson Whataburger the following week, and that unlike Hal and Axford, he's not a lock. Pemulis's USTA rank, excepting his Helicon 13th year in the year of the Purdue Wonder Chicken, has never gotten higher than 128, and the Whataburger draws kids from all over ONAN and even Europe. The draw will have to be weak indeed for him to get even one of the 64 qualifying round invitations. Axford's on the fringes of the top 50, but he got to go last year at 17, so he's almost got to get to go. And Hal is looking at getting a third or maybe fourth seed in 18 singles. He's definitely going, barring some sort of cataclysmic ankle relapse against either Port Washington or Quebec. Axford postulates that Pamulus isn't miscalculating so much as simply showing a slitty eyed confidence, which, as far as his match play outlook is concerned, would be unusual and rather a fine thing. Prorector Aubrey de Lint says publicly that seeing M. Pamulus in practice versus seeing M. Pamulus in a real match, that means anything is like getting to know some girl through email, as like email, keyboard type, pen pals, and really falling for her, and then finally meeting her in person and finding out she's got like just one enormous tit in the exact middle of her chest or something like that. Mario will get to come along if Avril can convince CT to bring him along to get Whataburger footage for this year's ETA promotional Xmas giveaway to private and incorporated patrons cartridge. Shocked and the glossy Syrian are laughing together about something up at the net post where they walk to gather gear and various spare rotator cuff and knee appliances after the Syrian kind of cornily jumped the net and pumped Shock's hand, breath and sweat steam rising up off and moving off through the fence's mesh toward the manicured western hills as Mario's laugh rings out at some broad mock supplicant's gesture Schacht's just now made. 7 November, year of the dependent adult undergarment. You can be at certain parties and not really be there. You can hear how certain parties have their own implied ends embedded in the choreography of the party itself. One of the saddest times Joel Van Dyne ever feels anywhere is that invisible pivot where a party ends, even a bad party. That moment of unspoken accord when everyone starts collecting his lighter and day jacket or greatcoat. His one last beer hanging from the plastic rin's 5 rings says certain perfunctory things to the hostess in a way that acknowledges their perfunctoriness without seeming insincere and leaves, usually shutting the door. When everybody's voices recede down the hall, when the hostess turns back in from the closed door and sees the litter and the expanding white V of utter silence in the party's wake. Joel, at the end of her rope and preparing to hang from it, listening, is supported by a polished hardwood floor above both river and bay's edge, perched uncomfortably in striated light in one of Molly Notkin's chairs, molded in the likeness of great filmmakers from the celluloid canon. Seated between empty Cougar and frightening Murnau in Méliès's fiberglass lap, his trousers crease uncomfortable and his cummerbund MIT crested, the lurid chair's directors are larger than life. Joel's feet dangle well off the floor, her squished hamstrings beginning to burn under a damp, thick cotton Brazilian skirt which is vivid, curled, pale purples and fresh red against a Latin black that seems to glow above pale knees, and white rayon knee socks, and feet in clogs that are hanging half off, legs swinging like a child's, always feeling like a child in Molly's chairs conspicuously perched in the eye of a bad party's somewhat forced feeling storm of wit and good cheer, sitting by herself under what used to be her window, the daughter of a low pH chemist and homemaker from western Kentucky. A lot of fun to be with normally, if you can get over the disconcerting veil. Among pernicious myths is the one where people always get very upbeat and generous and other directed right before they eliminate their own map for keeps. The truth is that the hours before a suicide are usually an interval of enormous conceit and self involvement. There are decorative bars, slender of black iron that pigeon droppings have made piebald over the west windows to this third floor cooperative apartment on the East Cambridge fringes of the Back Bay, where near Professor Notkin is holding a party to celebrate passing her orals in film and film cartridge theory, the doctoral program where Joel, before her retreat into broadcast sound, had met her. Molly Notkin often confides on the phone to Joel Van Dyne about the one tormented love of Notkin's life thus far, an erotically circumscribed G.W. Pabst scholar at New York University tortured by the neurotic conviction that there are only a finite number of erections possible in the world at any one time, and that this tumescence means, for example, the detumescence of some perhaps more deserving or tortured third world sorghum farmer or something, so that whenever he tummifies, he'll suffer the same order of guilt that your less eccentrically tortured PhD type person will suffer at the idea of, say, wearing baby seal fur. Molly still takes the high speed rail down to visit him every couple of weeks, to be there for him in case by some selfish mischance he happens to harden, prompting in him black waves of self disgust and an extreme neediness for understanding and non judgmental love. She and poor Molly Notkin are just the same, Jolie reflects, seated alone, watching doctoral candidates taste wine, sisters, sororal twins, with her fear of direct light, Notkin, and the disguises and whiskers are simply veiled veils. How many sub rosa twins are there out there, really? What if heredity instead of linear is branching? What if it's not arousal that's so finitely circumscribed? What if, in fact, there were ever only like two really distinct individual people walking around back there in history's mist? That all difference descends from this difference, the whole and the partial, the damaged and the intact, the deformed and the paralyzingly beautiful, the insane and the attendant, the hidden and the blindingly open, the performer and the audience. No Zen type one, always rather two, one upside down in a convex lens. Joel is thinking about what she has in her purse. She sits alone in her linen veil and pretty skirt, obliquely looked at, listening to bits of conversation she reels in out of the overall voice's noise, but seeing now no one really else. The absolute end of her life and beauty running in a kind of stuttered old handheld 16 millimeter before her eyes, projected against the white screen on her side for once from Uncle Bud, and twirling to Orin and Gin and Triple Y all the way up to today's wet walk here from the Red Line's downtown stop, walking the way up from East Charles Street and employing a self conscious and kind of formal stride, but undeniably pretty. The overwalk toward her last hour was on this last day before the great ONANite Interdependence Revel. East Charles to the Back Bay today is a route full of rain on sienna glazed streets and upscale businesses with awnings and wooden signs hung with cute colonial script and people looking at her if you look at the blind, naked glazes. Not knowing she could see everything at all times. She likes the wet walk for this, everything milky and helated through her veil stamped linen, the brick sidewalks of Charles Street unchipped and impersonally crowded, her legs on autopilot. She, a perceptual engine holding the collar of her overcoat closed and her poncho's neckline in a way that lets her hold the veil secure against her face with a finger on her chin, thinking always about what she has in her purse, stopping in at a discount tobacconist and buying a quality cigar in a glass tube, and then a block later placing the cigar inside, carefully in among the overflowing waste, atop a corner receptacle of pine green mesh, but keeps the tube, puts the glass tube in her purse, can hear the rain's thump on tight umbrellas and hear it hiss in the street, and can see droplets broken and regathering on her polyresin coat, cars sheening by with the special lonely sound of cars in rain, wipers making black rainbows on taxis' shining windshields. In every alley are green IWD dumpsters and the smaller red IWD dumpsters to take the overflow from the green dumpsters. And the sound of her wood sole clogs against the receding staccato of brittle Women's high heels on brick westward as Charles Street now approaches Boston Common and becomes less quaint and upscale. Sudden litter, flat the way only wet litter can be flat, appears on the sidewalk and in the curb seam, and now murky colored people with sacks and grocery carts appraising that litter, squatting to lift and sift through litter, and the rustle and jut of limbs from dumpsters being sifted by people who all day do nothing but sift through IWD dumpsters, and others people's blue shoeless limbs extending in coronal rays from refrigerator boxes in each block's three alleys, and the little cataract of rainwater off the edge of each dumpster's red annex's downsloping side and hitting refrigerator boxes' tops with a rhythmless tpop, 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 tpop. Somebody going psst from an alley's lip, and ghastly white or blotched faces declaiming to thin air from recessed doorways curtained by rain, and for an another directed second Joel wishes she'd hung on to the cigar to give away, and moving westward into the territory of the endless stem near the end of Charles, she starts to dispense change she's asked for from doorways and inverted up tilted boxes, and she gets asked about the deal with the veil and with a lack of delicacy she rather prefers. A sooty, wheelchaired man with a dead white face below a Notre Ray Pays cap silently extends a hand for coins. A puffed red cut across the businesslike palm is half healed and almost visibly closing. It looks like a dent in dough. Joel gives him a folded US 20 and likes that he has nothing. She buys a liter Pepsi Cola in a blunt plastic bottle at a store 24 whose Jordanian clerk just looks at her blankly when she asks if they carry big red soda water, and settles for the Pepsi and comes out and pours the pop down a storm drain and watches it pool. They're foaming brownly and stay put because the drain's grate is clogged solid with leaves and sodden litter. She walks on toward the common with the empty bottle and glass tube in her purse. There was no need to buy chore boy pads at the store 24. Joel Van Dyne is excruciatingly alive and caged, and in the director's lap can call up everything from all times. What will be at most self-involved of acts, self-canceling, to lock oneself in Molly Notkin's bedroom or bath and get so high that she's going to fall down and stop breathing and turn blue and die, clutching her heart. No more back and forth. Boston Common is like a lush hole Boston's built itself around, a 2K square of shiny trees and dripping limbs and green benches over wet grass, pigeons all over the same sooty cream as the willow's rinds, three young black men perched like tough crows along a bench's back approve her body and call her bitch with harmless affection and ask where's the wedding at. No more deciding to stop at 2300 hours and then barely getting through the hour's show and hurtling back home at 1:30 and smoking the chore boys' resins and not stopping after all. No more throwing the material away and then half an hour later rooting through the trash. No more all four scrutiny of the carpet in hopes of a piece of lint that looks enough like the material to try to smoke. No more singeing the selvage of veils. The common south edge is Boylston Street with its 24/7 commerce, upscale cashmere scarves and cellular holsters, doormen with gold braid, jewelers with three names, women with Valson's curtain bangs, stores disgorging shoppers with their wide, white, monogrammed twine handle bags. The rain's wet veil blurs things like Jim had designed his neonatal lens to blur things in imitation of a neonatal retina, everything recognizable and yet without outline. A blur that's more deforming than fuzzy, no more clutching her heart on a nightly basis. What looks like the cage's exit is actually the bars of the cage. The afternoon's meshes. The entrance says exit. There isn't an exit. The ultimate annular fusion, that of exhibit and its cage. Jim's own Cage 3 free show. It is the cage that has entered her somehow. The ingenuity of the whole thing is beyond her. The fun has long since dropped off the too much. She's lost the ability to lie to herself about being able to quit or even about enjoying it still. It no longer delimits and fills the hole. It no longer delimits the hole. There's a certain smell to a rain wet veil, something about that collar and the moon, saying the moon never looked away, revolving and yet not. She had hurtled on back home on the night's final tea and gone home and at least finally not turned her face away from the situation. The predicament that she did not love it anymore. She hated it and wanted to stop and also couldn't stop or imagine stopping or living without it. She had, in a way, done as they'd made Jim do near the end and admitted powerlessness over his cage. This unfree show, weeping, literally clutching her heart, smoking first the chore boy scrap she's used to trap the vapors and form a smokable resin, and then bits of the carpet and the acetate panties she'd filtered the solution through hours earlier, weeping and veilless and yarn haired like some grotesque clown in all four mirrors of her little room walls.
Was it